Hey team, welcome back to another great episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast. Today I've got a really good guest for you. We're going to be diving into the regenerative space a little bit with TJ Bradford. He is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Vayda. He's coming to us from down in Mississippi, man. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh man, it's a joy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's go. What does it mean for you, TJ, to be intentional?
Man, to be intentional for me is to really hone in and have that intense laser-like focus. I believe that certain things happen with coincidence, but I think intentionality is what separates, accidents from greatness. You know what I mean? And so sometimes you can have accidental greatness, but I don't think, greatness happens, by accident. I think you have to be intentional. I think you have to want it. You have to really strive to know what you're doing. But to be honest, you really have to know the why. I'm a avid sports fan. I grew up playing basketball and played in junior college and things like that before I tore up my knee. And I was probably supposed to be in the NBA finals right now, but that's a story for another day. But I just remember like training and just it was I had to be so intentional with all the things that I did because discipline without direction is drudgery essentially, and so we you got to keep the why. So being intentional really is about knowing the why and going for it, so and it's a big task, but being intentional is it pays off in the end.
Man, we were 2 minutes into this and you already dropped two quotable right at the onset. I love it. I love it a lot. Let's do some preaching today. So, what I loved what you said is this intentionality separates accidents from greatness.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Because I think, we can only control what we can control. And if you think about it, specifically in agriculture, we seek to control or explain about 20% of what's going on. We can't control the weather, we can't control input prices, we can't control soil moisture, to an extent, but accidental greatness really isn't greatness at all.
Mhm.
It has to be intentional. And when you are intentional about things, it's like you understand the why behind it. If you want to be a great business leader in agriculture, there are certain things that you have to be intentional about. You have to be intentional about your time. I tell people often, I say, you can't manage time. You can only manage yourself within the time that you're allotted. And so when you are intentional about your time, you're intentional about your boundaries, you're intentional about, what goes in and what comes out. And that doesn't happen by accident. I think we see things that we are stimulated by, and we think it just happens accidentally or it just happens because of natural talent. But intentionality is the thing that separates accidental greatness from true greatness, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, and I've certainly been guilty of this over the years. We compare ourselves sometimes against where someone's certain level of success. You're like, man,
Mm,
right? Or
yeah,
make it look so easy, but we didn't see the 10 or 20 years of intention that was
right.
creating the level of success that we see with that person. I saw this author speak one time, and this female author who had a very very popular book, and she was doing a keynote at this event, and she said when her book made it, people would come up to her all the time and say, "How amazing is it that your first book went so viral and gotten it just became such a massive New York Times, Wall Street, Amazon, et cetera, bestseller, bestseller, bestseller."
Mhm.
And she said, I hated to tell people that it wasn't my first book; it was my seventh.
Wow. Wow.
Just
Yeah,
because we see that that level of success doesn't mean that there wasn't a lot of intention over the years
right.
getting there. I think it's a really good message, man, for especially for young people coming up through the agriculture industry right now, because
Hmm.
people at the upper echelons of this space, leading, making decisions, or even maybe if it's just someone in your company who sells successfully,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's you can't just replicate 30 years
Yeah. Yeah.
in the right direction, which is what you said. This those the other quotable. I was like, discipline without direction is drudgery.
Yeah. because and for me, it's all about the why. I feel like the reason I'm with Vayda now is all about the why. At the heart, I'm a farm kid, a farmer, conservationist. That's the why. Why regenerative? Why conservation? Why stewardship? Because I feel like I don't. I feel like my children, they won't inherit land from me. I feel like I'm borrowing it from them. So it's like, hey, while I'm borrowing it, I want to I want it to be the absolute best. I want it to be 20 times better than when I got it. And so, it's always about the why. And so the things that you're doing, if you don't understand the why, and if you don't have that discipline, I think that's where burnout happens. To be totally honest, I think, burnout happens when you forget why you're doing what you're doing and you just go through the motions. And it's so easy to get burned out, in just about anything that you do because we get on autopilot and we get comfortable and we just know that it has to be done. And then we look up and we're like, man, like I'm not having fun anymore. And it's like, when was the last time you thought about the why? When was the last time you really conceptualized the why? And I think all that flows back to being intentional.
I love it. Well, you're definitely a man on a mission with a purpose, and I love that. Talk to us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and Vayda.
Yeah, so I tell people all the time I'm a plant nerd. That's just what I do. I love plants. I grew up, on a farm, seeing my dad, work the fields and plant things. And my earliest experience with that is I took some seeds from a cupboard. He was an ag teacher. There was some potting soil at the base of an ag tree, and I put it in there, and they were popcorn seeds. And man, those things start to come up, and it freaked me out so bad that I pulled them up and I went to bury them somewhere else. And I went to go check on them a couple of days later, and they were still growing. And so I picked them up and I ripped them into little shreds. And I was a big comic book kid, so I know that when powers transferred from the dad to the son, the dad usually, exited the place. And I was like, oh my God, I just killed my dad. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up telling him, and he just I remember him laughing hysterically, and he was like, "Hey, that's just how plants grow." And so I was a first or second grader, I was a young kid, and from that point on, I just remember being infatuated with plants, and my journey learning with plants led me, to a PhD in agriculture, and I love plants and people. Those are the two things that I really love. I'm passionate about, and my career led me through academia, through with the U time with the USDA, through the nonprofit sector with animal rights organizations, helping farmers go from animal agriculture to plant-based agriculture, and to here at Vayda, to where conservation and stewardship and regenerative ag, scaling that to make sure that, not only that we dispel the myths about regenerative ag, but to create a hard line in the sand saying, hey, this is where we can make insets for our future, because the way that we farm now, is we have plenty of technology. If you go through the history of agriculture, we have so much that we have learned. And I think regenerative is another place, regenerative agriculture is another place that we can really start, pulling things out of to see how can we adopt this on a larger scale. And, Vayda, we are a tech company, a tech-driven ag company where we develop software, we develop a lot of technologies when it comes to agriculture to helping farmers realize their potential, when it comes to regenerative agriculture. And so, we have programs that farmers can enroll in that we help them, assess their land to create a conversion plan for them from going conventional to regenerative. But we really learn about the farmer, and so and their operation and their capacity, their goals, their why. Hey, what is your why for your farm? Do you want to have X bushels per acre, or do you really want to maximize on the soil health so that we can really sustain that? Because the soil bank is really an economic resource that we have to steward, and we can't take that for granted. And so at Vayda, we really take regenerative and conservation seriously, and we also have a proven ground farm, two proven ground farms in Clarksdale, Mississippi, and in Newport, Arkansas, where we are putting these practices to scale across the farm, holistically. And we have, R&D situation where we are playing with new things and trialing things out so that we can not just be separate from actual farming, but to really see where it fits into actual practical farming.
Could you give us just a quick example of a practical application of something a farmer would be looking for? Is there a question that comes up that you're able to solve that problem for them? advising them in some regenerative agriculture practice, or can you just make that real for us if you would?
Yeah, so I think the most common one is the use of cover crops. The use of cover crops, depending on who you ask, you will get a vast different opinion when it comes to cover crops. Objectively as a science, cover crops, they do provide certain benefits when it comes to soil productivity and soil health. But because regenerative agriculture is a management philosophy, it's about doing the right thing at the right place at the right time. It may not fit in every situation practically. So the good thing about a management philosophy is that it can be applied different ways at different times in different avenues. And so when we actually put that into place, cover crops, planting data is important. And you want to have good adequate moisture so those seeds can germinate. But if you have a great harvest, then you're probably not going to have a great cover crop establishment because you need to be dry to harvest. And so you play with that soil dynamic. But when it comes to cover cropping, it's so practical. It's about, I tell people, all cover crops are not created equal. There are different species that do different things that are different and that are beneficial for certain situations. And what we like to do at Vayda is pair the farmer's soil type, soil texture, their goals with a paired species and paired mixes that benefits their goals. You can do a two-way mix that may fit the need for soil compaction and erosion, or you want to increase biodiversity with an eight-way mix. But then you think about cost. So, we try to do the balance of doing what's best for the farmer, what's best for the soil, and what's best overall. Because, when one starts to get out of whack, it's very hard to achieve the benefits that you want when you can't see it, when things are out of balance.
Wow. Very cool, man. Well, I'm a fan. I'm a proponent, and I'm constantly learning through these conversations I get to have with people like you that are in the different biological entities and different spaces. And it's been very cool to learn and grow. And I grew up on a small farm in Minnesota. My dad was into it way back in the 80s and 90s, and
Okay, yeah.
it become a very real thing. Going to be at scale across the broad scope of agriculture. Uh,
Hmm.
Seems like no end in sight for sure. So
Yeah.
being in the startup space, man, like talk to us a little bit about your talent attraction, retention. You guys got a couple dozen people on the team,
Hmm.
assuming there'll probably be some growth coming down the road. But what are you guys doing to bring in the right kind of people at the right time to grow the business?
Yeah, I think one thing that our CEO Mike does a really great job at is anticipating growth. Growth is not always easy. Sometimes like I said, sometimes growth hurts, but you want to be able to grow before you need to grow. And what Mike does is, I mean, he's a fantastic leader. He really anticipates the growth and starts preparing the ground, the soil for growth. So being a startup, we get to move fast and we get to pretty much, kind of set the pace. And what we get a chance to be a part of is really grabbing those who want to move with us, who are passionate about agriculture, who are passionate about farmers, who are passionate about, this way of life, and really hit the ground running with it. And so, our team, is made up of agronomists, made up of financial analysts, made up of those with a diverse background, when it comes to soil plant environmental conditions, if they're good at those. So we have a technology, our chief technology officer, product officer, they have a vast background when it comes to their various work experiences. And so bringing all those experiences together allows us to really be energized and move at the speed of industry. And I think that's so cool that we get to do, because we get to move fast, because farming and agriculture is not necessarily a fast-paced career or a fast-paced avenue, but we get to do it at a pretty fast speed so that we can take a step back and make these learnings available to people and the farmers. So it's really cool that we get to move fast. And like I said, my career in academia and with the government, we don't move as fast as this. And so and it's great to be able to move as fast, but it's also good to be able to have that experience to say, to pair the two, because you run, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Was there a learning curve for you personally coming out of the USDA into the startup environment? Because that's, I mean, two very contrarian environments.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was indeed a learning curve, and it was a learning curve that was it was like I imagine it's like a roller coaster. You're doing this climbing, you're climbing, and then once you get to the top, they're just screaming, but it was a learning curve because the way that industry communicates is different from the other sectors, and how you communicate is differently, and you have to be intentional about your communication, because you start fast and you want to sustain that. And so you have to fuel yourself to sustain that type of movement. And in industry, it's very important to be on the forefront, but it's also important to learn what you're learning so you can be doing the right things, because I feel like you learn more from uh failure than you do from success. But I think your failure should be a school and not a house. So you should learn from them and not stay there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Well, very, very, very well put. Talk to us a little bit about culture building in this environment. Like, what are you guys doing right now that's important to establishing the culture, in this space? Is that a focus for you guys yet? Is that an intentional practice right now? And where are you guys at in that trajectory?
Yeah, so culture is one of those things that people like to talk about a lot, but they kind of like let it bypass them almost. But I feel like here at Vayda, since we have such a diverse team and we have such a diverse background and bringing people together, we really have an aspect or an avenue where we not only celebrate that, but we talk about it. We have all of our meetings, our internal meetings, the time we get together. There's a theme of, hey, we realize everyone has different backgrounds. And I think the best way to learn about culture and to really celebrate culture is to listen. And so the team meetings that we have, the team offsites that we have, the places that we go to just bond as a team, to, come up with some, intentional objectives and OKRs, but also learn from and learn about one another. I give you this example on we have bi-weekly internal meetings,
Mhm.
and a part of those meetings, at the end of those meetings, we take time out. One person is selected, and they tell about themselves, who they are, where they're from, what they like to do, their hobbies, their interests, why they chose Vayda, what they're looking forward to doing. And that is something that I don't think most organizations have, or they take the time to do. And so for me, you work with people for a long time, and you see them often, you interact with them often, but hardly ever is like, do you ever think about, why did they choose Veda? Or, why are they here? Because people come from all over the place, and then you start to learn more about people. We have one person on our team that that loves to run half marathons. And I'm thinking, if I'm ever running, then you should probably run as well, you know? So, but it's really cool to learn about those things and learn about people. And I think at Veda, we take intentional time to do that. And I think if you're going to really champion culture, you have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, man. So much of it boils down to just being curious, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Workers or friends, and it's one of the things I really love about this podcast, because I, for the most part, get to sit back and just ask questions. Yeah,
Yeah.
what's going on? What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? And then share that, with the industry, and then people can pick up and take what works for them, out of
hmm
this kind of amalgamation of all the different ideas, and a little bit of a melting pot. But man,
Right. Right.
yeah, super super cool. What for you has been the biggest hurdle so far in your career as you've gotten into this role, director of strategic partnerships with a really cool company? What's been the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome?
Wow. So thus far, the biggest hurdle that I probably had to overcome was to realize um, that the center of the smallest world you will ever be a part of would be the one that you're in the center of it. And I think that in this role, especially strategic partnerships, there are so many other entities and organizations that are doing so many cool things. And sometimes it's really about, hey, there are other ways where, you can collaborate with those people where you may not have an 80% pool, you may have a 15% pool, but things that you learn and how you collaborate is so important. And so, for me, of course, being in academia with my own research interest and things of that nature, like I'm in my own world, but when you're partnering with people, or even when you're partnering, within academia, you kind of pull on, researchers and collaborators that kind of can go with you and kind of in line with that. But this role it's stretched me a lot, but it's been good because you get to learn so much. You get to see different perspectives and different sides of different entities and organizations that you may not would have seen, with yourself being in the center of the world. And so, like I say all the time, I said the smallest where you ever be a part of is the one where you're the center of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does it mean to be director of strategic partnerships? What sort of partnerships are you working to create?
Yeah, so those partnerships are, I like to say, it's a broad and vast, wide array ways that we can collaborate. So at Vayda, we have our mission of, we want to scale regenerative practices, as far and wide as we can. But how do we do that? And we can't do it alone. So other entities that we may partner with, it may be an entity that, manufactures fertilizers. Well, how can we partner with them to advance regenerative agriculture? Or it may be a nonprofit entity that is interested in small grain research. Well, we have quite a bit of acres that we can set up some long-term plots when it comes to small grain research, or even projects that we have measuring greenhouse gas emissions with universities. We are conducting regenerative practices, certain cover crops trials and rotations that would be beneficial, and this it serves as a test site for university. And so how can we really collaborate to advance regenerative? And it's not just in one way, but it's in many ways. And so the role that I'm in, for me, is fun because it's about relationships. How can we build a relationship to not only just serve our interests, but how can we serve each other's interests and still move forward?
Wow, I like it, man. That's cool. And so there's almost like a research arm to the business, right? And so you're
Hmm.
partnerships and being able to run those trials or tests or just do the research on that particular problem or set of problems that those individuals or companies are trying to solve for.
Yeah, because I think it's at the end of the day, it's all about what are we learning? What have we learned? What can we learn? And how can we learn more? And I think you mentioned earlier about, the curiosity aspect. I think it's interesting how as we go from kids to adults, we kind of lose that curiosity factor. And I think that the quicker that we can reclaim that curiosity just about all things, I really think that we can start asking the right questions, because when you learn, it's about learning. It's not learning what to do and what not to do. It's about learning how to think. And I think learning how to think is the core of curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Good stuff. What has been one of the biggest wins for you in your career so far?
Oh man, in my career, one of the biggest wins that I've been a part of is um, showing people how we are really connected to the land, and
Mm.
how we're a lot closer than we think. I'm amazed at how small the world is, but it's almost like you never see the same person twice in Walmart, but you always know someone who knows someone who is familiar with you or your family members. But the biggest win for me probably would have to be, um, you know, co- ironically enough, here at Vayda, there's certain cover crop mixes that we want to, advance, and that we want to learn more about. And sometimes growing them in the Mississippi Delta just does not work. But when we look at certain timings and how we plant things and how we do things, we've been able to uh, establish these species very well. And
Mm.
I'm excited about that because, it's like, hey, historically, these things typically don't happen. and we had a super dry fall, which was going against everything that we wanted to see. But when it came to the spring and we had our field day back in April, I mean, the cover crops were just beautiful. And it just goes to as a testament of, just being curious about stuff and, saying, hey, if this works well this way and we need this, like let's try to bring it together. And so though that has been like a huge win, and creating partnerships with some of my former colleagues, at the university, saying, "Hey, you need a test site. We have this many acres. Let's make it happen." So that's been a huge win for me. Probably the largest of my career. It may seem small, but for me, like anytime a plant can grow when it's usually not supposed to be growing, that's a huge win.
Cool. When you a little bit ago you said something about helping people recognize just how connected to the land we are. Could you go just a little bit deeper on that? I'd love to know more about like where your mind is at and how you help people regain that connection if they've lost it.
Yeah, I just think me being a farm kid and growing up on a farm, everything was attributed back to the land. So the crops that we grow, of course, the animals that we were around that we had. And for me, some people love the beach. They love to go to the beach. It helps them think clearly. For me, it still sound nerdy, but digging a hole in the ground, picking up that soil and let it rub through my hands, it really brings a sense of calmness and a sense of peace. You see articles now where it tells people, hey, go outside and walk and, take your shoes and socks off, go outside, why? I think because, we're connected to our surroundings, and the more we are aware of our surroundings, the more that we can see trees blow in the wind and see birds fly and just connect with nature. I don't think that sense of calm is accidental. I think it's something that we can learn from ourselves about nature, about being outside and things of that nature. And so when it comes to agriculture, we're looking at a plant that's growing, and we can learn from that. We can learn from that plant. Everything has to be sustained, and whether a plant grows, it has to be sustained. And as we grow as humans, that has to be sustained as well. So what are you inputting in yourself to sustain your growth? And I think I say, healthy things live, living things grow, and growing things change. And it's just like plants. So I feel like I'm not saying we're plants, but I'm saying that we can learn a lot as we connect with nature.
So true. One of my desires for the industry, one of the outcomes that we're trying to create at Thrive Today, is to help people recognize the fact. I mean, this is just straight up truth. Like we know a lot about the nutrition that goes into raising a good, healthy plant,
Hmm.
stock for that matter, uh, but not always ourselves.
Right.
And if you really realize, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean that's a very similar type of equation.
Hmm.
There's
Yeah.
disparities in the just even the nutrients that go into making good plants, good livestock.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I would love for people to have that deeper connection and see themselves as more connected in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
It's funny what you say about putting your hands. So I literally from the farm that I grew up on in Minnesota, I actually have a little bit of soil in
Oh
my
yeah.
like I have it there to like remind me, of like
Yep.
ground, like this is the soil that but we lived off the land. I mean, we
Hmm.
hunted for meat. We raised our own vegetables and everything for the most part.
Hmm.
And so I was literally was of that dirt,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I keep a little bit to remind me where I came from.
Yeah, it's a nice reminder.
Yeah. Well, man, I wish we had more time, but I love what you guys are doing. I'm glad we got a chance to get you guys out here on the podcast and share a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Vayda, and look forward to seeing you guys' growth, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I had a great time, and I think that where we're going with the regenerative space, it's going to be an exciting frontier.
Absolutely. Vayda.com, is that the website, or where do we send people to?
Yes, you can send to Vayda.com. That should get you where you want to go. And just if any question, please reach out. We love connecting, we love talking, sharing insights, sharing wins and things like that. So we'd love to connect anyway. And we'd love to have farmers connect with us and see how we can help.
Cool. Thanks for being on, TJ.
Thanks, Mark.